welcome back. So hello everyone, live and on the recording. Welcome to Sonoma County Wildlife Rescue. If a couple of you listening could do me the favor and let me know if I am clearly audible through my mask or not. So if you please give me some feedback if you can hear well or if you can't. Today we're going to focus on several of the individual orphans that are here at Sonoma County Wildlife Rescue. Yes, of course, we'll be spending quite a bit of time with our two juvenile river otters. Before that, we'll catch up on a few patients, including taking a look at some opossums. And at the end, we'll end up taking a look at another kind of owl that we didn't get the chance to enjoy last week. One of our western screech owls, my favorite species. And so, any feedback yet?
Not yet, no.
Okay. All right, well I guess we'll just roll into our area over here.
I can hear you just fine.
Okay, excellent, excellent. So we're going to head on in to our little hospitalized enclosures, including our incubators, our ICU. And so this week at the Wildlife Rescue, we continue to get more and more animals in. We're up to just shy of 150 patients on site, I think 147, one of the youngest. And so while we are getting a greater and greater diversity of species in, we are still getting very young, very small, very numerous opossums. So yes, the opossums continue to come in along all ages and conditions. And so this little orphan is younger than most of them. Often when moms are in trouble, they'll drop some of the bigger individuals. It's less common to get little babies in like this. And so you can still see the eyes are still fused closed. And unlike a lot of the orphans, these guys, instead of putting on a bottle, at this age we often still have to tube feed them, just in terms of, because they're used to being in that pouch on that nipple all the time. And so we happen to have a few different ages here in the clinic right now, so we can walk through the development of the species for a couple minutes while we're getting everything else set up. And so thanks as always for our incubators, for our Facebook patrons to get that going. So let's swap our gloves so we don't transfer anything, and take a look at the next stage of development. The cage right before. So after they are no longer dependent on heat, after they're no longer dependent for the incubator itself, we'll move our little opossums into these very protected, hello friend, in hospital enclosures here. And so, yes, I know. And so opossums, hi friend, here we go. And so this stage here, they should be toying around and eating a lot of solid food. They should be weaning by the time they're this size. A lot of times we'll find them dropped off from mom when mom was in trouble at about this age. And so when individuals of this size are in more robust condition, they're out in what we call our nursery, our transition enclosures, where they're out in that separate housing unit. And then as they get bigger yet, we move them to outside enclosures. And so now again, this is the hospital. And so it's not just about development, it's also about their medical status. And so if we have slightly bigger individuals that still had just come in and need more vigilance, or individuals that need more care, aren't yet stable enough to head outside, they'll still be in here. And so we have some slightly bigger ones in here as well. And so this time of year is we just get more and more individuals in. They're not yet big enough to head out to the wild. And so here we have our next stage yet. So this one obviously has some eye issues and some other concerns that we need to manage. And so at this age, if it was a completely sound individual, once it's done requiring the medical intervention, this age would be in one of our outside enclosures. And after they mature from there, they will get returned back to the wild. And so to catch you guys up, we had that mom-opossum we've been watching, the one that went through so much. And so a couple weeks ago, she was a little bit thin with all the energy those babies were taking. And so those babies were able to eat on their own. So we actually separated them from mom, and mom plumped right up. In fact, she's doing great. She's doing so well that she actually returned to the wild earlier this week. All of those little babies are still maturing a bit now, and they'll be set to head to the wild in just the weeks ahead. And so and for those of you who've been following along week after week, those foxes we had in here, those foxes have matured outside of the hospital enclosures, even out of the nursery enclosures, and they're outside as well. All three fox kits are together and maturing well. They're very spooked appropriately, and so we're not going to visit them today, but what we are going to visit today, the key species we're going to talk about is the North American river otter. And so Katie is just right there in that yellow box. We have one of our river otters. And so do either of these guys need cones anymore?
I'm still throwing one on the mail.
All right.
He's a little excited about eating.
And so what we do first, as you can see, we're going to do a weight check, see how they're holding up. Each and every day we need to make sure that they're gaining the appropriate weight. These are young, growing babies, and so they should be growing in size. Now, river otters are going to mature slower than some other species. And so these river otters are going to be a many months, probably at least a 6-month project yet, as they go through the various stages heading towards maturity and towards return to the wild. Now, we are one of the only facilities in the state that is properly set up to deal with these kinds of aquatic mammals. And so these individual river otters were actually transferred to us from a facility. They were found up towards the Sacramento area. Now, these are river otters, not sea otters. And so river otters are the same native species that we do have in Sonoma County. And yes, we do get orphans from Sonoma County on occasion as well, or injured individuals from Sonoma County. And so with you have orphan care, it is a lot of steps to the process. So what's happening right now is Katie is mimicking what the mother would be doing in terms of licking or stimulating. And so not most orphan mammals will not eliminate, will not urinate and defecate normally without that stimulation. And so we do have to make sure that it happens with each and every feeding cycle. And so these guys are down to just 4 feedings a day, is that correct?
They were at 6 until yesterday, and I'm going to attempt to cut them to 5 today.
Okay, so you guys can imagine this is a lot of work. And so we're going from 6 to 5 sessions each and every day. And so now a lot of you guys are tuning in because you appreciate the wildlife around us. And so it can be fun to see these little guys, but realize this is a very tough job because you have to put all the compassion and all the care into raising these orphans, but you can't snuggle them, you can't baby talk them, you can't do the emotional connection that you would with other animal endeavors. And so it really takes specialized mindset to be able to provide that kind of compassionate care. And so for those of you who are used to hearing the squeaks and chitters of those otters, and so the otters' mothers would, while these are primarily aquatic species, the mothers would head off onto land in order to have their litters, and then these guys are obviously not ready for prime time in terms of hitting the water just yet. And so right now, these guys are still on the bottle, and so they do need to be bottle fed, and so luckily this one seems like it's starting off as a pretty good, strong eater. And so these guys do still need many weeks of care before they're going to be ready to start experimenting with water. So they're going to be here in the hospital area for several weeks ahead. Later on, eventually, they'll be transitioned to the den box in our aquatic area, where we'll have to take them to the shallow waterfall area for some swim lessons. After they have full and complete capabilities in terms of navigating the water, then they'll get free range to the aquatic enclosure. And we'll be able to check in and see that progress because, as I said, these guys will be with us for so many months down the line. Now, these guys are prone to diseases just like any other species. There's one protozoal disease that actually has taken down quite a few otters. And so these days, we just head that possibility off the pass by putting them on antiprotozoal medication for their first several weeks with us. And so these are little carnivores, and so as they get bigger, they will be trained to eat fish, to hunt crawdads, and all those things. And so in the wild, when they're nursing on a teat, they wouldn't have as much risk of having air come in as they do on a bottle, but yes, it is a very real risk on a bottle. So right now, this otter baby is indeed getting burnt. And so the formula that they're fed is a special formula for the species. And so is it otter specific, or do we...
It's for river otters and American beavers.
All right. So yeah, so the milk on every species needs a different milk. You couldn't just find a raccoon, find an opossum, find an otter, and give it cow's milk or give it kitten or puppy milk replacer. If you do, they're going to have major intestinal issues. And so the aquatic mammals have some milk features that are in common. And so that's why this formula is made for the two. So this is a pre-manufactured diet for that specific purpose. And so you can see that the bottle, the formula there, was sitting in warm water. We're heating it up. You'd never microwave this. You wouldn't want to risk hot pockets, things that are too hot, within that area right there. And so the question I see is, will they be cohabitating with the beaver? And most likely, yes. And so last year when we had both a beaver and otters at the same time, they were able to cohabitate in that enclosure. And so we'll have to wait and see, but that is plan A, that is the goal, to have these guys share that same space. If they don't get along, of course, we may have to figure out some sort of timeshare arrangement with that aquatic area and have them rotate through. We are building a second den box in that area so that we can accommodate either the training of young ones in a separate area or even access to that area from two separate sides. But hopefully they'll be able to coexist as they rehab, as the individuals we had last year did. And I see a question about getting wormed and vaccinated. And so definitely deworming is something that we worry about with most all of our species. And so we do have these guys on a parasite schedule. Partially it'll be based on what we know these guys are likely to have. And also we will do fecal exams and then just respond to the parasites that are present from there. In terms of vaccines, these guys, you can't give them, there isn't otter-specific vaccines. And so there are a couple that we can consider, but it has to be the right type of vaccine. Modified live vaccine that's made for one species can actually cause the disease in another species. And so these guys aren't predictably vaccinated. It depends on our risk assessment and availability of options. And that's going to be a different answer for each species. Some of the species we do vaccinate routinely. For example, when the foxes come through, we do vaccinate them with the ferret version of the distemper vaccine because the canine version would give them the illness instead of protection. But vaccines are an important tool in our toolbox to try to control disease, especially for individuals that are going to be needing to rehabilitate for so long. And so being at a rehabilitation center means that they're at places where a lot of other animals are coming through, and so we do want to protect them from any potential disease exposure. And then we also have all our basic biosecurity protocols or biosecurity measures to try to minimize that impact. All right, so this is back to so we do have the two individuals here, so we're hoping we'll go ahead and finish off the meal for the other one. Now, are these both the same gender?
This is a male and that's a female.
All right, and so then in terms of determining if this is the right number of feedings, I assume we're weighing and responding to their weight, responding to their hydration, responding to their alertness. What other considerations do we worry about?
Stool firmness.
Okay.
These guys are really sensitive. We have to spend a couple days transitioning them onto the formula, and then we monitor really closely the amounts. Sometimes they'll kind of tell us when they don't want any more and their bellies are full, so we respond to that too. These guys are doing good though.
Gotcha. And so you've been caring for these guys pretty intensely for quite some time. Any special, and so are you able to tell the two apart just at sight, or? Their behaviors are a little different. One's a little whinier than the other one. That would be the female, squeaking away.
She's a little more adventurous than he is at this point too. She's been developing a little faster.
And then how do these guys compare to other otters that we've had in years past?
They're pretty similar as a species. They tend to have these behaviors and develop really slowly and be really needy.
All right, so does that wrap up the routine care?
Yes, it does.
All right, so we can see the closet that they're in now. But as with all of these animals, these are true wild individuals, and so we take care of getting the job done, providing them the care that they need. But we don't have the luxury of being able to spend extra time coddling them as you would with a domestic individual. And so, again, we do have that male who has been suckling on himself, on his private parts, in counterproductive ways, so he still needs his cone. The female has outgrown that behavior, and he will too in time. Just not being able to be in the native natural environment sometimes will result in some aberrant behaviors, but luckily this is something we've seen before. We know it is going to be temporary, transitory, before they move away. So right now they are in they are young enough, they are delicate enough that we do have them in this carefully monitored hospital environment. As they mature, they'll be moved to a more and more natural area. All right, and so with river otters are an important part of our local ecosystem. They are found throughout the waterways of Sonoma County, and so lots of times if you're lucky, especially later on towards late summer, you're going to be more likely to see them, as some of the young pups will be growing up and having to head on out and find their own space. And so the river otters it is common for them to go onto a pond, consume all the fish and crawdads they want in that particular area, and move on to another. Other river otters are going to stay at some larger bodies of water, things like Lake Sonoma, Russian River, things like that, and hang out in certain spots for a much longer period of time. And so they are one of the species that is always exciting to see in Sonoma County. We have a significant population, but not a big enough population that you're going to predictably see them, but they are animals that we do see around. They're so capable and so agile that we don't often get them here as rehab patients. Usually it's going to be an orphan situation. For example, last year's, or 2 years ago, there were some that were actually, the mother gave birth under someone's house. And so, and then there was some projects going on, long story short, those orphans were left behind. And so that was one way we had them. Every once in a while we'll get them coming in from trauma, from being injured by people, inadvertently for the most part. And so we do get them in every once in a while. The adults are relatively high stress, and so they are much more challenging to care for compared to some other species. River otters are going to be primarily carnivorous. They are going to be eating all those fish and crawdads once they transition to solid food. And so they're not very omnivorous. They're not like foxes or raccoons or some of the other species that we have around. These are distinct species from, say, the giant river otters of the Amazon rainforest, or they're completely distinct from the sea otters as well. Very different species. Sea otters are more prone to habituating towards people, and so you do have to take extra precautions with orphan sea otters. But that's going to be out of our area. You have to head towards the Monterey or other facilities like that for that kind of care. We haven't had any sea otters around Sonoma County to come into our care. But river otters are one of the more exciting species just because we only get a handful of them in every year. Any other questions that we have coming through?
Somebody asked, and it might just be good to recap if the otters will be cohabitating with the beaver.
Sure. So we do have our one large aquatic mammal enclosure, and so we will have to play it by ear. These guys are still a couple months away from heading out into that large water area, but we will see how they get along with the beaver based on years past when we've had other beavers and otters rehabilitating at the same time. They have been able to cohabitate just fine. And so someone asked earlier about vaccines. These guys can get parvo. Unfortunately, it's not the version of parvo that is protected by the vaccine. And they can both be victims of diseases from the spread of domestic, and they can also be a vector for things, such as the life cycle of certain protozoa.
What purpose do the stuffed animals have?
Oh, the stuffed animals. So the stuffed animals are there just to give them something to rub and comfort against. They would be in a more padded kind of den type area in the wild. So we want to make sure that it's not all hard walls there. That it's something for them to be able to be with. Fortunately, we do have the pair. We do have the two of them, and so they can get a lot of that normal interaction between the two, which is great. Much higher success rate when you have that situation.
Are the otters playful?
Are they playful? They are a very dynamic and playful species. And in the months ahead, as we watch them develop and grow, when we get to the point where we can take them out to the shallow water and then eventually into the large water, you will see just how energetic and active they are. But yes, they are a very playful species.
I think that's it.
Okay. And so one other thing I wanted to show you guys today is we do have another kind of owl. So last week we went over with those barn owl and with the great horn owl fledglings. Now, all of those fledglings are back out in the wild. The great horns were returned to the nesting sites where they came from. Those barn owls, where there was no mother to take around, are actually out with a foster barn owl mom, where we have found that barn owls will take in the chicks that are not their direct offspring and still provide excellent care for them. And in fact, later today, I can go check in on that nest and see how everyone's holding up. But those are not the only two owls we have around. We also, in Sonoma County, are lucky enough to have the western screech owl. And so western screech owls are a nocturnal species, and so they're it's a pretty groggy individual. And so I just brought it here. I haven't taken my full veterinary exam of it yet, so we'll take a look at it together. And so these guys have a lot of the attitude of the great horn, where they'll do that kind of clacking sound. But you'll see all that attitude is packaged to a much smaller size. And so let me lift them on out. And so this is also a fledgling, but it's near full size. And so for the species. And so you can see these guys are going to live primarily in the hollows of old growth oaks, and so they do need that specialized environment. And so you'll see them a lot there, or I don't know if you'll see them, but they reside a lot in the park type areas where a lot of those oaks still live. Helen Putnam Park, Annandale, things like that. And so this is our western screech owl. He still has that fuzzy appearance because he is on the young side, but don't let that fool you for his size. He is almost completely full grown. And so, yes, hello friend. And so in terms of vocalizations, you can see they do a little bit of a hiss, kind of like a barn owl, and that clack, more like the great horned owl. Their eyes are large, but not bigger than the barn owl, but not as big as the great horn. These guys are pretty intense predators. They will go ahead and catch mice. They will catch lizards. They will catch other similar species. I'm just taking a quick look at part of his ear right now. And so, yes, hi, how you doing? So when we examine owls, we often will need to put a hood on their head to help calm them down. And so I'm just going to grab out one of our owl hoods. Actually, Danielle, would you help me cinch this on for me? I'll take a look at the rest of our owl's body. All right, so with a lot of wildlife, it depends on the species, but with quite a few species, once you cover up the head, they're much calmer and able to be examined. And so with most avian species, I'll also check the ulnar vein, make sure that's nice and robust in terms of our hydration. You can see that vein right there running across that bone. And so just blanch it, see how quickly it comes back. Nice, robust, well hydrated. It's kind of like looking at the gums on a mammal. Going to check the stretch and range of motion on the wings. And so whenever you hold a wing, you always do it at a joint. You don't hold downstream from it. Check our other wing. Check our elbow, check our shoulder. All right, move our way down. Gonna hold, oh, this is a very meaty little fellow. Excellent pectoral muscles. Has a very strong body condition score. Let's go ahead, scroll down, check those talons out. So the talons are going to be the main weapon of screech owls as well as all sorts of other owls. They can bite, but usually it's the talons that's going to be their main tool. And just check them out on the back end. Make sure his rump is doing fine. Good. So that vent, that cloaca where everything exits, looks appropriate. Don't feel any big distension. All right. So we are doing a full checkup on this little screech owl today. I'm going to check the preen gland, the oil gland at the base of the tail, also technically called the uripygial gland. And so it doesn't show well for the camera through these feathers, but there's that little protuberance. You can see that fleshy little area. And so that's where a lot of the oils come from. And so the bird will go back, put its beak along there, and then use that to smooth out its feathers all along its body. I'm going to take a quick listen to this fella, and then we'll get ready to head him back. And so this is one of those species that's all around us and we're just unaware. So sorry, I just had to take a quick listen there. Heart rate is going around 180 beats a minute. Lung sounds are good as well. So this is one of those many natural neighbors that are all around us and we're just unaware because during the day they're sleeping in those little areas in those old oak trees. And then at dawn and dusk, they're coming out and hunting all the small prey. Sometimes these guys will catch a larger rodent, they'll eat part of it and come back to it the next day, but often they'll be taking out several small rodents per day. So this is our western screech owl. And so this is a little fledgling who seems to be in excellent condition. And so at this age, at this size of development, sometimes they will get out trying to fly and just not have full capabilities yet. And so if we know where his exact nest is, then he will be one that will attempt to re-nest because his body's in great shape. And so is that what you think of it? All right. So I can go ahead and put him back.
Perfect.
All right. And so as we taper it down today, any
Do
other
you have
questions?
a few questions? Yes.
Okay.
So one person asked why the owl is here.
And so this was an owl that was brought in by a good Samaritan. So if someone finds an owl down and about, it could be that it's just part of the normal fledgling process. It could be that there is some injury. It is not uncommon for us to see an injury or a problem. And so what we'll often do in these kinds of situations, first of all, we'll figure out the situation over the phone. So if you find a bird down, give us a call first. If it's something that's unclear, we'll have them bring it in. We'll do the assessment, and if it's healthy like this, then we'll go ahead and be able to swing it right back out to the wild within a day or two. If there is something going on, then we can provide the care that's needed.
And then why is this? What does the normal enclosure look like for the owl?
Gotcha. So in terms of normal, depends on what you're talking about. So if a bird needs hospitalized type care, we'll use the hospital type cages that we have. If it's one that needs, let's say, some strength training or some time before it's ready to release to the wild, we do have some outside mews. And so the mews we looked at last week, well, they're huge for a screech owl. We can use them. Often, when we have screech owls in particular, we'll put a smaller, pretty confined den box in there so they can go in where they're going to be comfortable. And then out in the wild, they're going to be living in pretty small crevices inside trees for the most part. But they don't tend to live in like owl boxes the way barn owls do.
Okay. And then the blue box, what do we use those for?
Oh, so this is a carrier, so it's commonly used, so you might see them the same kind of carriers you use for cats, or I guess small dogs, but really cat carriers. And so this will be this is very easy to disinfect. It's made out of corrugated plastic. And so it is one of the common types of carriers we'll use to transport animals that are appropriate size for it around the center. Or even when this owl, say it was an adult owl instead, and then we were going to go release it free into the wild, this would be the kind of thing we'd hike out with when we return it to its location. All right.
I think that's it.
So thank you guys so much for joining us again. And so next week, we'll check back in with some other animals here at Sonoma County Wildlife Rescue. We're at the time of year where we just keep getting more orphans in. Pretty soon, we'll start to get a release where some of the ones that came in earliest will be ready to release. So we'll see if it's the right timing for us to do that as part of our live stream or not. But sooner or later, that time will come. And so as of now, we keep on creeping up our numbers. We've got about 145 animals in care right now. That number will come up. It'll probably peak at about 200. By the time we get there, hopefully we have just as many being returned to the wild as we have coming in. But we are definitely in the swing of a busy season. And so we are now getting a lot of raccoons in, a lot of skunks in. Oh, our nursery is full of skunks. There's like 15 skunks. And so such is the way, the ebb and flow at a wildlife rehabilitation center. So thank you guys so much for joining us for a little glimpse into what we do. And we'll see you next week.